Monday afternoon for us. Hi everyone, thanks for having me today. So I'm Elizabeth Newbold. I work at the Science and Technologies Facilities Council, which is part of UKRI, and I was one of the small number of people who looked at the career tracks for data stewardships, and my collaborators were Jan, Lise Brew and Valerie McCutcheon as well. And we did our supporting output, which I think was adopted earlier this year in January. So the career tracks was part of the interest group for professionalising data stewardship. And within that interest group, we split out into a number of different subgroups. We weren't working groups, we were sort of task groups to look at particular issues. And during sort of 22 and 23, we started to look at what does a career track look like, because we're sort of talking about professionalising data stewardships, and one of those aspects is if you've got people being a data steward, how are they going to progress in their careers? Because it's kind of a bit of an unknown at the moment, and partly because data stewardship means a lot of different things to different people. So, as I said, we had this focus on the career tracks, and as our supporting output, we had an overview of a survey that we did, and part of the output was a data set as well, which we felt was important to sort of start to add to the evidence base of the understanding of where are data stewards working, where are they going, and to do that we kind of felt, well, what do we know already? And in some things we know a lot from other work other people have done, including in the RDA, but in other cases we felt actually we don't really know an awful lot in some respects. A lot of it's hearsay, so we wanted to try and get a little bit of evidence to support some of our thinking and future areas for work. So we did a survey between June and October 2022 to coincide with the RDA plenaries, so we could actually promote it during those periods. One of the reasons we did that is we're quite conscious that a lot of the evidence has come from Europe, and we were really trying to see how we can get more of a global approach to this, and I'll say a little bit more of that in the future as we look at the results. So, as I said, we wanted to understand who were or are working in data stewardships or similar roles, and we were sort of quite specific about have worked or are currently working, because we know from other work that a lot of these data steward roles are often project related or contract related roles, and they're not necessarily permanent positions. So we also wanted to try and gather evidence from people who had previously worked in roles or were leaving these sort of data stewardship roles. And also we were quite specific that we kind of had to say similar roles to data stewardship, and we had to provide a definition because we wanted to capture different research context and different research settings, because we find that the definitions do depend on where you work. So we did provide a definition, which I don't have to hand at the moment, but it was quite broad to try and capture a wide range of backgrounds and settings that we could. So that was kind of the background from where we were coming to it from. Also, I should say, during this time, or overlapping partly with our work, there was an EOS task force looking at careers and professionalising activities as well. So we actually liaised with them quite a lot and have had a lot of informal and semi-formal meetings with them along the way to discuss our results. So the first thing we discovered was basically there was a plethora of job titles. We asked people what their job title was. We'd given the broad definition of what we were counting within data stewardship, and realistically just the numbers of titles that were coming out were wide-ranging, to say the least, and unfortunately in our word cloud of the job titles you'll actually see that data steward doesn't necessarily appear anywhere or particularly clearly, but the biggest focus was on research data managers. I'd also say people self-defined themselves within this as well, which was quite nice. And so some people just saying this is what their jobs were. They didn't necessarily have a job title as well. So we did try to look across the regions. As is always the case, a lot of our respondents came from Europe, but we did get some responses from other regions, and we could see that actually it didn't really matter where they came from. Data steward as a job title was actually not used very often, and most people had other job titles. And something I just realised I forgot to say, we had about 290 responses to the survey originally, of which we analysed about 240 because some people didn't complete the survey and things. So it's not a vast number, but it's a pretty significant number of responses from the community. So we also looked at where people were working, and unsurprisingly, the largest percentage were in higher education institutions, followed by public research, and then just a few other, and that didn't really vary across the regions. And again, it wasn't particularly surprising. And we also wondered how long people had been in their current positions, and contract types. Majority of people, which we were a little surprised by, actually were on permanent contracts, because of the surveys and the pieces of work we'd kind of been thinking they were more project based. But the majority of people been in their roles less than 5 years, which I think is not necessarily unexpected if we were thinking about data stewardship as a concept, because they do tend to feel as though they are newer roles, although they are growing and being established. So looking at where people currently are, we did ask some where they might go next. What's your career plans? This was about tracks, not so much how people were coming into the careers, but where people might then go. And we had some open-ended questions from that, and they really broke down into sort of two streams were emerged from this. They were really along the research support type roles, which is probably reflected in the word cloud that we saw of job titles. We had sort of data librarians, research data managers, curators and things. But we also saw a parallel stream emerging of people who possibly more in project roles, maybe not, but saw it as a sort of swapping between the sort of data stewardship roles and the research roles as well. So not necessarily jumping straight into research support, but hopefully moving back into a more research orientated role in the future. Of those in research support particularly, there was, unsurprisingly, looking to more senior or managerial roles, but also more specialist roles. In our conversations and just our interpretation of the results, we thought it was quite interesting that they were saying about roles they were going to be moving into in sort of established professional areas, so saying librarianship or data governance. They weren't really highlighting that there was data stewardship or more senior roles in data stewardship at the moment. And that probably is one of the gaps, again, highlighted by the fact that people were quite early into their career of this. And as I said, people were also looking at lateral moves between data stewardship and different research positions. And one thing I haven't put on the slide, but we did mention in our output, is that there were some fairly, not very many, but a few very negative responses about this, that they perhaps didn't feel it was a profession, and it was just a bit, a little bit despondent, which we can't read anything into, but would be actually surprising if everybody was actually, yay, this is fantastic all the time, because we are realists and not everything is always wonderful. So yeah, a sort of mixed picture of where people came from, where people are going to. And I think what we probably concluded is that it actually probably gave us more questions than answers, and which we couldn't analyse from the data that we have, although we have a nice evidence base now. But I think reflecting on this, we said, if you're thinking about professionalising roles and responsibilities and getting recognition, then, do job titles actually matter? And do they influence the roles and responsibilities? As we saw, people weren't called data stewards. And is that a limiting factor in recognition and progression for these types of roles? Or, and does it matter? Is it the fact that these skill sets are professional skill sets, or do we actually want to see that these are professional roles as well? And I think that's an area that needs more exploring, and that's one of the things we did discuss with colleagues in the EOSC task force as well, about how do you do this? Because I think we probably felt you don't get recognition if you can't see yourself, and that can be quite a difficult thing when people are working and aligning themselves. Perhaps people are aligning themselves with other professions rather than with data stewardship because they can see their recognition there. I missed a word off here, but do people performing data stewardship see it as a profession? And again, that was something which I think we need to explore a little bit more, and what would that mean for people? And then what are the actions that you do need to professionalise the RDM roles? As we said, we saw RDM as support roles, but people weren't necessarily thinking about that as career progression. So we feel that's another area of work that can be looked at within the interest group, and there are activities around that that could be explored. So that's basically all I was going to say. Just give a flavour of what we looked at. And as I said, I think it was an interesting exercise, and definitely I think there are still a lot of questions that can be answered and will be taken forward with the chairs of the working group, interest group of RDA.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. That was really eye-opening. If anybody has any questions, if you could raise your hand, that would be super. Oh, Gabby, hi. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? First, I apologize for being late. I couldn't manage to find the link.
It's all right, you're here now.
I'm here. I want to ask Elizabeth, because you see what happened with that stewardship in a country like Costa Rica is that it's so new, is really so new, that we always wonder what you need to be to be a data stewardship. And I just saw the diversity of professionals that comes to be data stewards. Would you say that there is a minimum profile in to be able to be a data steward?
Well, we didn't look at that within our interest group work in this task, but I think the point that you're making is actually a key one that crops up, and I know Jan is on the call as well, who's chairing the interest group. But I think that is one of the difficulties, that it means that data stewardship can mean so much to different people in the different contexts that they're working, and that it is customizable, I think, as well, for what you need where you are. And I think that is one of the things that we still need to probably tease out, because it's a spectrum, and I know there's other reports and a lot of work that have looked at the different spectrums and the range of activities that cover from one end to the data governance at one end and data science possibly at another sort of thing. So I think it is a challenge. So I don't have a minimum scale. I'm sure other people, and I can see Kevin's got his hand up as well, that there is other work that's been done on this, and I know certainly in the Netherlands they've done a lot of reporting on this as well.
Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, just a response quite particularly on that idea of the, what's the minimum for the skill. So you're right, Elizabeth, there has been quite a lot of work done on trying to define, required skills for different roles in this area, not just for data stewards. I know we've done a fair amount of work some years ago on a project called EOS Pilot around that. Most recently, that's been carried forward again, driven in a European context, but we're trying to take a global view in something called Skills for EOSC, and that's defining a set of what are called minimum viable skill sets for a variety of these roles, all to do with supporting open research in different contexts. Data stewards is certainly one of those, and yeah, it won't be surprising, as you said, Elizabeth, the Netherlands have been leading a lot on this, and they've been involved in that as well. So I know there's also been a number of the RDA working groups engaged with that. We did want to make sure in that project that we're doing that. I can't recall now because I'm not directly involved with that, whether this particular group has been engaged on that. But if it hasn't, then we ought to make sure it is.
Yeah, that's great. Well, anyway, if one day you think in continuing profound, deepened in the research, we volunteer here in Universidad Nacional to talk about how to be a data steward and all the needs, customize the possibilities to help and all that. We can talk.
I'm loving these resources that are coming. Thank you, everyone. Elizabeth and Jan as well. Data stewardship has been a topic in my home organization as a society for ever since I've been there and before. And there's a real challenge. I don't need to tell you, you've just given us a presentation. There's a challenge. How, like, I see societies as supporting the building the skill sets, partnering with RDA and organizations like DCC and folks that have those skills. Have you thought about things like, so you're talking to the organizational assembly. Probably everyone on this call has some connection into a data stewardship in some way. I'm guessing here, our ears are probably all perked for what does it mean to actually see this through and how can we benefit? I'm guessing. How can the organizational assembly help you? Is there a way for us to maybe have a task force where we're taking a look at what you're doing and what does it mean for our own organization? It's a guess. I'm not sure, everybody, if that's actually true, but I think it's true for a lot of us.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't chair the interest group, so I don't want to presume anything. And yeah, I might have another view because there is other work. And as our career tracks on, we haven't actually, to be honest, met since then. And we've also know that EOSC have been putting out their report. But I think it is still an active area. And as you said, so I'm sort of trying to think how to say this. It's like you say, I think everybody talks about the skills and there's been a lot of work on the skills. But I don't know, how do you move? That question is how do you move it on to get that recognition? And it is, maybe we do need to sort of have a bit of a fundamental question and maybe use one of the RDA plenary sessions to say, and this is a rhetorical question, like, does it matter? And if you're sort of saying it's sort of like, why does it matter, and and therefore what is an action that can be taken? Because you can keep looking at skills, but skills evolve always. And is it the recognition that is actually now the important thing? Because I think if you have a portfolio of skills, and I don't know what other people are finding, but can we actually recruit to those skills and into those posts? And how do we, when we get people into the roles, how do we progress their careers? Or is it just that people are getting stuck as well? And so I think those are the bit more moving away from the skills, but thinking about once you've got the skills, how do you get them embedded, and how do you then actually progress your careers? That's a bit of a non-answer. I'm sorry.
No,
but I do think that's maybe the questions we ought to be teasing out a bit more, which are a bit harder.
Of course it is. Otherwise, just your word cloud alone like blew my mind apart. I mean, I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. That's a very telling. Let's see, Rich, please go ahead.
Yeah, firstly, very interesting. And as you say, the word cloud was somewhat frightening, but I think there's a couple of observations I'd like to make. Firstly, I've been doing quite a bit of work with the research software engineering organization in the UK. Oracle sponsored them for the last couple of years with their AGM, and they are looking at professionalizing the whole thing around research software engineering. And it strikes me that perhaps there becomes a professional track in the RSE that might be something to link with them on and get them to think about it as well. So that would be my first observation. And secondly, I would be very interested if we could run the data working groups model against those data stewards that you've got and see what their views of it are. That was my second observation. So something to think about there. But I can certainly, Shelley, link the two organizations together if you want me to do that. That's not a problem. I know the right people.
Is Michelle Barker and Daniel Katz, is that the group we're talking about?
Daniel's part of the US organization. I'm part of the UK organisation, but there are a couple of people in the UK that I perhaps don't know about the RDA, and perhaps I should do some linking. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be interesting. It's a similar challenge, but not the same. But when you said a professional track, that is very interesting. That would be, I'm watching the chat. We've got a bit of a buzz going on right here. And yeah, it would be very interesting to connect the dots and learn from each other. Oh, look at that. It's very buzzy. Look at that, Elizabeth. Very buzzy. Jan, please go
Okay.
ahead.
No, that was just what I wanted to say, and I think, but also it's extremely interesting. The word cloud alone was worth it. So you know. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Rich. Go ahead, Jan.
Thanks. I would just like to add on what Elizabeth mentioned about this recognition, because in our interest group, we have been already discussing for some time that no matter, there are many different topics about data stewardship, ORCs, about skills, profiles, career tracks, and these are all dynamic things. But eventually, we see there are two general categories or streams that you can work, like data stewardship as a service. So this is really from organizational perspective. How do you run this as a service? How do you provide it as a standard component that's necessary for conducting research activities? And the other one is a more personalized approach, is a data stewardship as a profession. So how you're gonna improve yourself in terms of skills, how you get training, how do you progress in your career track. And all of these, actually, the titles don't matter to individual, or in organizations, you may call the service in a different terms. But actually, I think from organizational perspective, that's really probably falls back to very traditional way you organize universities or services. How do you recognize the service as an important part to make sure the university or institute function well, and how you make sure you attract people and to give them room to develop? So maybe for that, in that point, I see every representative here from organizations, you all have different perception, reflection on your own organization to see how this would work. And there must be common points that probably connect with all. That will be the point we could further collaborate. And then in terms of interest group or other working groups from RDA, when there's a more specific call raised by the members, then we can respond to that. So that's, I think, there's definitely a lot to do, and we should also keep our mind open. So we need to be more aware of different terms people use and talked, but meanwhile recognize these are actually have a lot in common, then we can collaborate and work together. That's what I want to just highlight about this recognition part. Thanks.
Really appreciate it, and thank you for all your work. Natalie.
Yeah, just a very brief thing to add is that there's a real spectrum, I think, of where research data stewards think they're getting recognized or not. So there's a bunch of examples in the chat there from the Netherlands, which we often think of as quite advanced in this area. But I was at a workshop talking to some data stewards at Leiden who were saying, you know, we're classified into a certain category within the university, which means the research work or the research expertise we have is not recognized, and this causes problems for career advancement as well. So you can go from having no sense of what the conception of data steward is up to there being a very advanced thing where there's still issues. So if you get those groups talking to one another, that might be helpful. And the other thing is that when I was in Ireland, one of the projects, open science sort of national projects that was put together was to create a network of research data stewards. And I know that's happening elsewhere. But what's useful about something like that is people can see, you know, if there are enough adjectives to describe the kinds of things, even if it's not just one title, they can see their work in that. And then when you start bringing people together, you start to kind of create a sense of what that job is just out of the collection of things. So maybe that's the opposite way, as opposed to this is what the thing is. There's like, okay, we're all doing something sort of like this. How can we learn from it? And I think when that network in Ireland was first put together, there were really only 1 or 2 universities that had people with that actual title in their people with that term in their title, and it's growing from there. So yeah, throwing together a network, even if you're not sure who's going to be in it, is one way to help build it as well.
Thank you, Natalie. All right, well, I'll make one comment and then back over to Jan, but there are a few things to get the organizational assembly a buzz, and I think you've all just broken the buzz meter on this topic. So this is really exciting. Go ahead, Jan.
Oh, I just want to follow up on what Natalie just mentioned. Actually, in our interest group, we just welcomed a new task group, which is called Network, and that's actually is initiated from the network of data stewards in Ireland. And now they try to connect with other national networks. So, and that's also in collaboration with the Skills for EOS project. So that's really, that's happening. And hopefully they will expand to much broader networks. But indeed, that's really important. And that's the practices of community. Yeah, thanks.
That's nice. Dawei.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if there's any sense that how the people perform this data stewardship job right now, like what kind of titles they prefer to be called.
Elizabeth, did you hear him? It was a little garbled for me.
I think he said, did we do anything about what titles people prefer to be called rather than what they were called? And we didn't actually ask that. It's a really good question. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we didn't think about that at the time, but it is something we could sort of think about if anybody follows up on this. As I said, I think we just, yeah, it was kind of not a can of worms as such, but I think we have just created, it was really, we've now got some questions that we now have more questions, I think, as well. But I just wanted to go back to the point about the RSEs. I think there are parallels to how the RSE professionalize themselves and to their organizations and things to where perhaps data stewards are now. And I think we could learn a lot from what happened within that community. And I also think that professional societies and things have a role to play with the sort of interest groups and tracks and things.
Thank you. You just pushed
pennies
my button.
worth.
Yeah. So honestly, Elizabeth, so I'd really like to talk to you and Jan about this. And this is an important thing within my community. And I don't know that we have anybody else from societies on here today, but I could bring together a number of societies to maybe hear your presentation again. Okay, so let's connect. And then OAB members, do you think we should, well, OA members, hello OA members, let's just nominate you all for the OAB right now. Should we take this forward and talk about maybe an RDA track? Hillary will have to hold on to her hat, but what do you think? Should we work with the IG to create an actual RDA track for data stewards? Okay, you're thinking about, okay, if you didn't have to do it, would you support it? Haha. So put your hands up. Oh, I have, oh yeah, okay. Jan,
I'm trying to get a sense of what you mean by track, Shelley.
So when Rich was talking, he said that the for software, they have a software professionalization track, like a plenary pathway. Thanks, Natalie. Like a series, like either during the plenary or separate from the plenary, sessions that were specific for education and awareness and connection. That's what was in my mind.
Okay, because what's been talked about in the chat, the plenary pathways, there's no special sessions there. That's just a construction of a route through the sessions that are already there, if I understand correctly.
Right. This would be the opposite. We would intentionally set up, like, let's say, take the skill sets and, well, okay, it wouldn't have to be part of the plenary. It could just be workshops or something. It would be serious weighing in on what the skill sets are from an RDA point of view, and then implementing that at an RDA level such that there were a series of learning opportunities broadly. Okay, something to think about. Maybe a bridge too far at the moment, but maybe we could think about what that would be. Beth, go ahead.
I'm just having a thought. Sorry, I jumped in from another meeting and I think I still have that other meeting in my head, but there is a proposed ambassador interest group that is trying to coalesce around a charter, because the idea of the ambassador is kind of ambiguous to us right now and could mean a lot of different things. But I wonder if you're asking questions about who's available to do this work, to kind of spearhead the engagement with data steward track, if the ambassadors, if they get together as a group, is the right group to kind of approach with that work.
Wow, that's a neat idea.
We do
Okay.
have a talk at the upcoming plenary if anybody's interested.
All right. This is very exciting. So Elizabeth, thank you for the talk. We do have other agenda items. I've probably consumed quite a lot of time.